Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the big conversation. Unfortunately, this is my very last one that I'm doing. For Woodside Park Shaul. So looking forward to finishing with a bang, because we do have a very special guest on tonight. It is a privilege, a real privilege, to be able to introduce Rabbi Shaul Rosenblatt, my father, to come on and speak to me and to us tonight. And it's humbling to introduce him. Just a brief introduction to who he is and why we're really going to benefit from hearing him tonight. My father, it's funny, what do I refer to you as? My father grew up in Liverpool and was there till the age of 17. At the age of 17, came across a rabbi who inspired him to get more interested in the religious way of life, because the background that he came from was more of a traditional background, not such a religious background, and not religious at all, shall I say. And although his dream and his passion was to become an astronaut, and he had a scholarship to Caltech University to study aeronautical engineering, he ended up staying at yeshiva in Israel for 7 years, became a rabbi, and then moved back to the UK in 1991 to set up Aish UK, which many of you may have heard of. In 2001, lost his wife, my mother, to cancer after a few years of battling the illness. Wrote a book about that called Finding Light in the Darkness, which was recently revised edition. It's called Why Bad Things Don't Happen to Good People. Highly recommend that book for those of you who would be interested, and we might hear about that book soon as well. 2006, left HUK, started a new organization called Tikkun, and then more recently, 2 years ago, so 2018, set up an organization called the Rabbinic Training Academy, which trains newly qualified rabbis to better understand the job that they're embarking on. And without further ado, I'm going to bring on Rabbi Shaul Rosenblatt, my father, to the conversation. Good evening, Abba. Welcome.
Evening. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Sure.
One of the first things I wanted to talk to you about was, perhaps it would be interesting for people to hear your religious journey and how you went from being an atheist to being a fully fledged rabbi, setting up an organization teaching young Jews about Judaism in the UK. I think people would really be interested to hear what that was and how it happened.
Well, I don't know how much time you got, but I'll try and give you the very, very shortened version. As you said, I was living in Liverpool, and I was kind of started when I was sort of 15 or 16, going into what they then used to call the sixth form. I think they still call it the sixth form. Again, as you said, I was not particularly connected to Judaism. I believe I had a non-Jewish girlfriend at the time. If I didn't, I certainly did later on, and didn't really keep any mitzvahs in particular, and had no interest in Judaism whatsoever. It wasn't a relevant part of my life. I did happen to go to a Jewish school, but that was by accident. I won't get into the details of that. Take too long. So when I was sort of coming into sixth form, a rabbi came to the school, and he started off the Jewish studies class by saying, "Who believes in God?" Never something any rabbi had broached before. Rabbis just assumed that you did, even though most of us didn't. And very few of us put our hands up. We thought he was going to be insulted by that or take offense to that, but he actually didn't. He said, "Well, now, who believes in God wrote the Torah?" And even less of us put our hands up. I don't even know if anybody in the class put their hand up to that one. And he said, "Okay, great. You're a good class over here. This is, I'm looking forward to this. Very different style of rabbi than what I was used to, And he said, "Well, now I'm going to, over the next 6 weeks, 8 weeks, prove to you that there's a God, and prove to you that God wrote the Torah? Well, it was a bold assertion, proof. And we all kind of said, "Oh yeah, sure you are, Rabbi. You know, what are you going to do? Teach us about King David, you know, and why you can't eat pigs?" We were very cynical and skeptical about it. But he started teaching, and after a couple of classes, I was actually very impressed. Reluctantly, and much to my shock and horror, I was impressed with what he was saying. It made sense to me. I thought he was going to talk about faith and how you have to have faith, and I can show you why you should have faith. It wasn't. It was actually quite intellectually rigorous, at least in my mind, what he had to say. And so I came to him and I said, "Rabbi, you know, thank you, and it's interesting classes, but unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to attend anymore." And he said, "Well, why not?" You know, he said, "They're interesting." I said, "Yeah, but what you say is quite compelling and quite convincing, and last thing I want is to be convinced that God wrote the Torah. I mean, heaven forbid I should be convinced of such a thing. I mean, yeah, I know what it means. I'm not stupid. You know, it means I got to keep kosher. It means I can't eat my Chinese restaurant anymore. You know, I still recall my trip to Hong Kong when I was 15. I don't know if anybody's ever eaten there. Can't recommend it because it's not a kosher restaurant. So don't get me wrong over here. But I loved the floating jumbo restaurant in Hong Kong Harbour. I mean, that was just absolute heaven in terms of Chinese food. Or maybe they have a kosher section nowadays. You never know. You know, my Chinese food. I used to go. I used to go to Anfield on a regular basis. When I used to tell this story, I used to say in the halcyon days of Liverpool Football Club. But you know, maybe they're back again. I mean, who knows? Who knows? Good start. A very good start this season. Like I said, I was probably more interested in non-Jewish girls than Jewish girls, and you know, I wasn't interested in you know, Torah being true. So he said, "Well, you should be more intellectually honest," and I was like, "Yeah, well, I should be, but I'm not." And so I kind of, you know, he took me to the headmaster because Jewish studies were mandatory. We had it out. I said, "I'm going to leave the school." I mean, I was very serious about it, and I got an exemption from Jewish studies. So I kind of had some lessons off, which was even better. And but then some of my friends, you know, stayed in the class, and gradually started becoming religious. Started wearing yarmulkes. They started wearing tzitzis. They started saying mumbling funny words before they ate their food. I still recall well a friend of mine coming to meet me in the park one Saturday, as it was for me then, and he's running towards me, and suddenly stopped in the middle of the field. And I said, "What's going on? Is everything okay?" He says, I can't move. I said, "Why not?" He says, "Look, there's daisies on the floor, and if I stand on the daisies, I'm going to kill them on Shabbos, and I can't. I'm breaking Shabbos." So he basically tiptoed around every single daisy in the field, taking him about half an hour to get the last 10 meters to me. And, you know, I thought, oh my gosh, this guy is an absolute lunatic. What is this rabbi done to him? So cut a long story short, and it is a long story, and I realize there's only a certain amount of time for this. I for a year and a half, I wouldn't come to his classes. I did go to his house for Shabbat. He kind of encouraged me to come, and I out of politeness, I went, and I hated every moment of it. Finally, it was coming near to the end of my school year, the end of my sixth form, upper sixth, and he invited me for a Seder. I was polite, and I said, "I'll come, but invite me closer to the time." Closer to the time was the day of the Seder. I didn't realize, and he had one of his students, my friends, call me up and say, "Can I have a lift there tonight?" And I was like, "A lift where? Where are we going?" And he said, "To the Seder." I said, "I'm not going to the Seder. I'm not going to Rabbi's Seder. Forget it." And so he gave me a whole guilt trip, and I went to the Seder, and I loved that Seder. Again, reluctantly, against my will. I found it so meaningful. At the time, I was living with a heroin addict, and the rabbi talked about addiction and slavery and personal slavery, and how the Haggadah is a guidebook to freedom from our own internal addictions. And he went through line by line almost and showed the incredible wisdom in that. And I was blown away, absolutely blown away. And we were up in his house talking till 4 a.m. And at 4 a.m. he said, "Come on, why don't you stay the night? It's late." My car had broken down, so I didn't have it with me. I had a long walk home through a particularly dangerous park in those years in Liverpool. I don't know if people remember the Toxteth riots, but I lived kind of not too far away from Toxteth. And he said, I said, no, I thought about it. It didn't take me long. No, can't stay. I got to get home. I made some excuse. I didn't want to risk my spiritual life. I'd rather risk my physical life. And so I walked through this park at 4 a.m. I picked up a big stick before I got in there, and every wrestle I jumped, I was ready to kind of fight my way through. But when I got to the other end, and this was my sort of my, I don't know what you would call it, a moment on the road to Damascus.
I'm just conscious of the fact that the sound is, we can't hear you so well. Is there some problem with your microphone maybe, because it's not coming through?
Yeah, it could be. Let me try and change to my sometimes this thing doesn't work so well. Camera, audio, microphone.
No, I can't hear you at all. It's muted.
How about that? Any better?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay,
yeah.
So let's leave it at that. So well, I'll just carry on from where I was up to. I hope you heard what I said.
Yeah, no, we heard. Yeah, up to the top stuff.
Okay. I got to the end of this park, and I had this epiphany of which just occurred to me, like, well, what am I so scared of? Why am I scared of this rabbi? Why am I scared of something that might be true? Surely, if something's true, I should deal with it. Not like an ostrich, hide my head in the sand. Let me decide if it makes sense first, and then decide what to do next, rather than allow the potential ramifications to stop me from even making a decision. And so I went back to the rabbi, later. I don't know when it was, Pesach Chol HaMoed, a few days later, let's say. And I said to him, "Look, Rabbi, I'm interested. I'll give it a chance. Teach me." And I listened, and I was honest, and I was open. And it didn't take me long to be convinced that minimally, that before I went and threw my Judaism away, I had to consider it and consider what it meant to me, something I'd never done. And so I was planning on being a ski instructor in Austria, but there was no snow until November. Nowadays, I don't think you get snow till December, January, but in those days there was snow in November. I had time off in the summer. And I decided, look, my friends are going to yeshiva. I'll give it 6 weeks. See what it means. See. After 6 weeks, I'll make another decision. And after 6 weeks, I was engrossed. I was engaged. I loved it. I found it so meaningful, so deep, like nothing I'd ever had in my life before, and so true. And it really spoke to me. And so I decided I'd got to stick around. I stayed for a year, deferred my university, stayed for another year, deferred it again. And then I said, you know what, that's it. I really want to become a rabbi and, use perhaps what I've understood and what I've seen in the background that I've had to be of assistance in guiding others in a similar direction. And that's kind of why I went into outreach as well. And, came to the UK in 1991, as you say, to set up Aish UK over here.
Can I ask, before we get on to Aish, because I want to talk about Aish, lots of people will know friends of theirs or family members of theirs who have embarked on sort of like a religious journey, and it's not such a simple journey to embark on. I'm just wondering, in your experience, whether you had times where you regretted the decision you made, whether you thought back and wondered how you ever got involved with it, and what you could advise to others that may go through a similar experience.
Oh gosh, all these questions, I could spend a whole hour on every question you asked me, but yeah, absolutely. There were times when I really looked back and wondered what had happened to me. There was one particular period that I recall when I was about 30, so you're talking 13 years later, whereby I wondered how I got into this whole thing in the first place. Really wondered. Felt like I don't know if I did the right thing. I was just young and impressionable and stupid and enthusiastic, and got caught up in it. Got caught up in something that maybe I now regret. At that point, I was married with 2 children and a third on the way to a religious wife. So I wasn't sure how that would work out if I decided, well, that's it, I'm done with this now. And really what I did was I kind of went back to basics. I went back to sort of what had convinced me in the first place, to sort of the evidence that had been impressive to me at the time. Instead of getting all emotional and caught up and frustrated and upset, I went back to that. And again, when I did that, I just felt like, you know what, this makes sense to me. It really does. And again, I felt like, as inconvenient as it is, as restrictive as it is, as difficult and challenging as it might be, I feel like there's a truth here that I can't avoid. And both times that I did that, sort of when I started at 17 and then when I was 30 again, once I made that decision that it made sense to me and it was true, I settled down again and I could really enjoy it and engage in it and feel connected again. That was 23 years ago now. And so far, so good, Maybe I'm due another glitch along the way, but who knows? Life is a roller coaster, and it's a journey, and we each go through the journey in our own way. But as things stand today, as I look at it, Torah and Judaism makes more sense to me than ever, and is deeper and more meaningful and more beautiful than ever.
So I have an interesting question for you as well, something that just occurred to me now. Looking back at those years, I mentioned at the beginning, my mother passing away, your wife passing away.
Yeah.
Do you think that your religious journey is what helped you get through that episode in the way that you did? And would life have been very different had you not been on that journey?
I think it's part of it. Part of what helped me get through, a big part of what helped me get through. And I would say the main thing in my mind that helped me get through, that I'm not sure how it would look differently without this. And I often wonder, somebody who doesn't believe in God and doesn't believe in Olam Haba, in the world to come, how they can relate to the fact that they've lost somebody and they're gone forever, and they'll never see them again. And, it's so reassuring for me. And it was so helpful for me to feel that, there's a God who loves me, and there's a reason for this, and I might not see it, but I believe I will. And over time, I've seen more and more, and it makes more and more sense to me what happened. But secondly, that I just believe I'm going to see my wife again, and she's not gone. She's here. She's with me. She's here in spirit and in soul, if not in body, and we'll be reunited one day. Causes problems as well, how that makes sense with the fact that I got remarried. How we're going to work that out in the world to come? Well, I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, But it was so reassuring for me going through the experience that it's I'm not sure how I could have done it without that.
Okay, really interesting. There's 2 more things I wanted to talk about tonight. This, like as you said, we could talk for hours, but
yeah,
I really wanted to hear from you. I guess it's sort of 2 things, which is one, and then something else after that as well. But number one, you mentioned why you started Aish UK. I thought it'd be interesting to hear why you moved away from that and set up a different organization with a different style. And number 2, why you eventually ended up setting the Rabbinic Training Academy as well, which is an academy which I've been blessed to have been a part of for the past 1.5 years and just graduated from.
Yeah. Okay, great. One of the things I learned from my Rabbi Noach Weinberger of Shalom, who was an incredibly great man in my eyes, wise, sensible, and with a deep commitment to Torah and its values, was the idea of what we call cheshbon and nefesh, which is spiritual accounting. And he used to say, you got to know what you're living for. He used to say that all the time. What are you living for? Shaul used to say to me almost every time I saw him, you know what you're living for? What are you living for? And that sense of sort of knowing what I'm living for and knowing what I want out of life is really important to me. And it's something that's stuck with me and stayed with me and has been around for my entire sort of religious life. But more than that, he talks about how the in particular the mysterious Yesharim, the path of the just, Rabbi Chaim, what's his name, Luzzatto, Rabbi Chaim Luzzatto. Chaim, has he got another name? No, Rabbi Chaim Luzzatto. I can't remember.
Moshe Chaim Luzzatto.
There we go. Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. That's the one. So he talks about how you should do that every day. Every day you should ask yourself what you're living for, and it shouldn't just be the same answer you had yesterday. You're a day older, you're a day wiser. You've seen new things, you've experienced new things. That's what growth is. Growth is not being stuck in the old, not being stuck in the same. It's about being open to new possibilities, to new ideas, to seeing things differently, to having new insights. And so I'm always open to that. Just because this was something I saw when I was 21 doesn't mean I see it the same way when I'm 31 or when I'm 41 or when I'm 51. And that's kind of the way I've always lived my life. So I threw myself wholeheartedly into outreach, sort of when I came to London at the age of 24, 25. And as I grew and as I got older and as, my ideas developed for better or for worse, I started to see things differently and I started to have new insights. And I just realized, or realized for me at least, that there were things in what I was doing that I wasn't happy with, that I felt differently about nowadays, that I wanted a different approach to it, that I felt like, there were lots of reasons. I wrote myself a whole white paper for myself as to why I see things differently now. I'll give you just a couple of examples. I felt like I'd been too aggressive in my approach in outreach. I felt like I had been too intellectual in my approach. I felt I hadn't considered enough people's well-being in what I was doing, people's emotional health. That's important. That's a foundation for the life they're going to lead. Lots of things, like I say, you see time's running out, so I'll cut it short. And I just decided that I want to take a different approach, an approach of it towards education that was about softer, gentler, was about introducing people to Jewish ideas, to Jewish wisdom, to Jewish values, and just allowing them to make their own decision, whatever it might be. I felt I was too agenda-driven. I had a goal: take a person who's secular, make him frum. I felt like, and I feel nowadays, that no, what I would love to do is take a person who's secular and introduce him to the beauty, to the wisdom, to the greatness of Judaism, to the meaning, and then let him make his own decision. And if he doesn't want to be frum, that's his prerogative. That's his choice in life. It's not for me to convince anybody of anything. And that was sort of what made me take a different path. In terms of the Rabbinic Training Academy, I just felt like as an individual, there's a certain reach I can have. There's a certain impact I can have. I felt it would be much more leveraged if it's kind of like, again, I'm trying to condense everything into a very short time. But one of my students said to me, who's a very close student of mine, she said to me one day, wouldn't it be great if we can have a lot more rabbis like you? And I thought to myself, there's something I believe that I have developed within myself over the years that is of value to the community. And I'd love to be able to offer that to more young rabbis, that they can kind of share with the community. I also felt, and again, condensing a lot of things into a short time, I also felt that we don't do our rabbis justice in training them. With doctors, we would never take a doctor out of medical school and stick him doing open heart surgery. How could you dream of doing such a thing? And we don't. He needs years of mentoring, on-the-job mentoring. And yet we'll take a rabbi out of rabbinic school where most of what he's learned is about what happens if a fly falls into your soup. And we'll stick him into, and I'm saying that those aren't important things, and this is part of Torah, absolutely, but we'll stick him in sitting with somebody who's suicidal, and assume that he knows what to do. I mean, I just don't understand how we can feel that's a responsible way of training our leaders and training our rabbis. And I felt like to create something that would be a segue between rabbinic training and being on your own in the job would be of value for our community, and that's why I set it up.
What do you think the main qualities a community should be looking for in a rabbi, given the fact that you're training them to be community leaders?
I would boil it down to one thing, and that is humility. To me, that is the everything. That's the beginning and the end of being a rabbi. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu, the person who we call our rabbi, the only person in history I think we've called Rabbeinu, our rabbi, the rabbi of the entire Jewish people, his greatest quality was he was Anav Mikol Adam. He was the humblest human being in history. It's no accident that the greatest rabbi in history should be the humblest human being in history. There's other qualities as well, but that one's so important. I wouldn't like to go beyond it. If you haven't got that, you haven't got anything. And if you have got that, you've got everything.
Interesting. Okay, I know you wanted to leave by 9, so we're going to try and stick to that schedule.
Okay.
You've got supper to eat. I wanted to just spend the last few minutes. It's a shame because we could spend so long on all the topics we've discussed, and we haven't really done all of them enough justice, but that's okay. It gives people a good flavor of what more they can hear from you if they want to find you elsewhere. The last thing I wanted to talk about was something which I think is a lot of people's minds. Number one, we have Tisha B'Av around the corner, so it's also relevant to where we stand in terms of the time of year, but also in terms of recent events. I wanted to hear your thoughts about anti-Semitism. Number one, it's something which we Jews think about very, very deeply, starting tomorrow night on Tisha B'Av. And it's something which is very much on people's minds, given the crazy tweets that have been sent out by that crazy guy, if I can call him that. And I was curious to hear, number one, where you think the anti-Semitism comes from, and number two, what the Jewish response should be, and especially to things like this. I know you all often have a very different outlook on this than the way most other people would see things. So hence, I think it might be interesting to get a different perspective.
So I'm not going to answer your questions directly, but I think indirectly, I'm hoping that it will respond to them. Tisha B'Av and these 9 days that we're in, and the 3 weeks in particular, is a time when we reflect on the horrors of our history. And there is no history like Jewish history when it comes to horrors. And the Holocaust was a culmination of it all. But it was by no means the be-all and end-all of anti-Semitism and of the suffering that we have been through throughout our history, but certainly in the past 2,000 years of exile. And Tisha B'Av is a time when we feel that, where we see that, where we get touched by that, where we feel the pain of the Jewish people. Where we feel connected as Jews through pain. Most of the time, we feel connected as Jews through joy and through meaning. On Tisha B'Av, we feel connected through pain. Many years ago, when I was first in yeshiva, and my Jewishness started to awaken within my soul, let's say, and within my heart. I just suddenly started to feel this deep sense of connection to the Jewish people. And out of that arose a need, a desire, a burning desire to visit Poland. Now, this was 1986, and Poland was communist, and I didn't know of a single other Jew that had ever been there to visit. So I don't know where I even got the idea from, but I just felt I had to go. I was in yeshiva with 100 guys or so, and so I figured find one person that wants to go with me. I couldn't find a single one. They all thought I was nuts. I was young as well. I was 21, 22. You know, it was a young age to go visit a scary communist country, and it was a scary country. I think if I'd have known how scary it was before I went, I would have probably maybe not gone. So I just decided I'm going on my own. You know, I'll go and I'll figure it out as I go along. I wasn't well prepared enough. I went by train. I got to Katowice station, and I'm like, okay, how do I get to Auschwitz now? You know, from here, don't know what to do. And I had a big backpack. It was, in retrospect, it was ludicrous what I did, but you know, the folly of youth. It was an incredibly meaningful trip for me, and I recall going to Birkenau, and people on this kind of, you know, podcast, webcast, whatever it is, have probably, a lot of people have probably been there, and you'll recall it's a busy place, Birkenau. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people there. You go. I was the only person in Birkenau. It was me and nobody else. It was an amazing time to go, actually. And I recall walking into the middle of this giant field that is Birkenau today, and I just lay down, and I just cried. I don't know how long. It could have been as much as an hour. I just cried and cried and cried and cried and cried, and I felt such a sense of Jewish pride and Jewish connection, and so, I don't know, it was so meaningful to be Jewish, and again, in a short time, it's so hard to kind of describe what I mean by that and to explain what that is, and it just touched me in the most deep way possible, and to me, that's the power of Tisha B'Av, is to feel that sense of connection. To feel that sense of connection of what it means to be a Jew, of what we are as a nation. You know, it says in Psalms, I'm with you in pain. God, when we suffer, it says that God is with us more than when we don't. And I feel when the Jewish people suffers in a similar manner, we have the potential as Jews to feel more connected to the Jewish people than at any other time. So in particular, that to me is Tisha B'Av, and that's what it's about. And that's why Tisha B'Av for me is always a beautiful day. I look forward to Tisha B'Av because there's so much richness in the experience. But in terms of anti-Semitism, you know, I feel that we live in such good times. We live in a time where we don't know what anti-Semitism is today. You know, if you went 200 years ago, you know, 150 years ago, when my grandparents left the Ukraine, you know, left after the Kishinev pogroms, and you said to people, there's a rapper, you know, who's doing some anti-Semitic tweets, they would laugh at you. They would say, oh, we wish that was the anti-Semitism that we experienced. You know, now, yes, one thing leads to another, and we have to be careful. There's no question about it. But I don't like the idea of trying to find anti-Semitism around every corner. I think it's important that we also balance that. And yes, something like this, you know, this is, in a way, a particularly insidious form of anti-Semitism, you know, looking at what he says and how he says it. And the fact that, you know, the more he is criticized, the more he's anti-Semitic, which is quite incredible. I mean, it's pretty stupid if nothing else, but it shows you that he's committed to it, that he believes it, that he's not just, he genuinely believes what he's saying, it sounds like, which is a pretty, as I say, insidious form of anti-Semitism. But still, I feel we have to look at the bigger picture as well and see what a wonderful time we live in, and see what an accepting society we're in, and what a good society we're in, and how far we've come. And you know, be grateful for that, and not look to fear, you know, every rustle of every leaf around us, and to instead of battening down the hatches, we just have to look at how can we contribute and what can we give, and not, in my mind, our battle today as Jews is not a battle against anti-Semitism. That's a small thing, and that is there, and it's got to be considered, and I absolutely take it seriously. But our real battle as Jews today is, how do we give to our world? How do we share the message that we Jews have, the mission almost that we Jews took upon ourselves 3,500 years ago at Mount Sinai? How do we continue to share that with the world? How do we continue to ensure that that is not just as relevant as it's ever been, but even more relevant than it's ever been? Because I believe that the Jewish message is more relevant than ever in the history of humanity. And that's what I would like us to focus on in Jews. as Jews, what can we give? What can we contribute?
Amazing. Thank you. So I'm going to let you go, and I just wanted to thank you so much for agreeing to come on and sharing your thoughts. There's a lot I could say about you. I'm going to share it with people after you've left. But one thing which I admire one of the most is the fact that you're not scared to share your opinion about things, no matter how unpopular that opinion might be. So
gets me in trouble sometimes, but you know, you got to be honest. You got to be honest.
Exactly.
Otherwise, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, thanks, Keeps.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining.
Such a pleasure. Such a pleasure.
Wishing you well, and I'll see you soon.
Yeah, look forward to it. Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Lots of love to you and to everybody. Bye-bye.
To everyone else who's still watching, I just wanted to say thank you so much for tuning in tonight and tuning in all the previous nights that we've done this conversation. I can't believe this is the last one. This is number 11 out of 11. And I really appreciate all the comments that you've shared with me over the past few weeks. All the people that have got in touch to say how much they've appreciated the conversations. I wanted to say a big thank you to all of our guests that have come on and given of their precious time as well. You've heard from a man who I deeply respect. For those of you that are grateful for me being at the shul, you have my dad, the man you just heard from, to be grateful for, because most of what I know comes from him. For those of you that are happy to see me leave, then you've got that man to blame, because he taught me everything that I probably shared with you. But for now, wishing you lots of love in the rest of your lives. This is not my farewell speech. There hopefully will be some sort of Zoom opportunity. But thank you so much for joining. Thank you for giving me the support. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your comments. And please God, we as a community, we as a Jewish people will remember that mission statement that we heard about before. We will contribute to the world in the way which we know we can. And please God, next year, we won't be sitting on the floor and crying about Tisha B'Av, but we'll all be together in Jerusalem, dancing and singing about the fact that we as a people have come together and really lived up to the mission that we can share with the world. Amen.